I know I'm a little late to the game, but with the new GH5 Mark II and GH6 announcement, Panasonic breathed new life into the Micro Four Thirds system, and I for one I'm very glad they did, because Micro Four Thirds is one of my favorite formats when shooting video. But most of us GH5 users are now thinking, should I upgrade to the GH5 Mark II, or should I wait till later this year and fetch the GH6 instead? So let's take a closer look. The GH5 is a very capable camera, and I just recently made a video about why you should get a GH5 in 2021. And I think all the points I made in this video are still valid, even though with the new announcement making the OG GH5 a little bit obsolete. But why do I think that? So the price. Every piece of gear I think shouldn't only be measured by the final product it can deliver, but also by the price tag on it. And if you know me, you know that I like to use cheap cameras to get the most out of it. And on the used market, the OG GH5 is still such a great value for the money. You can get it now used for around 900 euros where I live, and I think nothing comes close to that. And I said in my last video that if the GH6 comes out tomorrow, that the GH5 will still only be half the price, and I think I'm right. The GH5 Mark II is a third more expensive than the GH5 original, and the GH6 with a price tag of $2,500 is more than double the price of the OG GH5. And if you compare the specs, we still don't know if the GH6 is a much better camera, so we have to see about that. But for now, if you want to compare the price, you can get two OG GH5s for the price of one GH6, so you have to weigh in on that. But the feature set is probably the most important thing. We can not only look at the price, of course, but so let's get in and compare the new features of the newly announced cameras. At first sight, the GH5 Mark II doesn't seem to be that big of an update over the OG GH5, but there are some features I think are very nice. For example, the option to switch the fly-by-wire focus to linear focus is huge for me. This was the reason why I took the Olympus 12-40 f2.8 over the Panasonic 12-35 f2.8. This is my main complaint with mirrorless cameras, that you can reliably pull focus manually. This is why I still don't want to use Sony E-mount lenses, and why I don't use native Micro Four Thirds glass as much. I know many shooters out there love their autofocus, but it still isn't for me, even after using the Canon C100 with its dual pixel autofocus and other Canon cameras with dual pixel autofocus. It never was a game changer for me, and I think pulling focus manually has its own quality, and I don't want the camera to decide when to pull and how to pull my focus. This is just my personal opinion. If you feel otherwise, it's great, and there are cameras out there that have great autofocus, and I think that the native glass with fly-by-wire is probably better for autofocus than older glass with linear focus, but I think it's just so great that manual focus pullers like me have now the possibility to pull the focus and reliably do it over and over again without having to worry about that I missed the focus because I turned the focus ring a little bit too fast. There are two other image quality features on the new GH5 Mark II that I think are very important. For example, the 4K 50p in 10-bit recording, even though it's only 420, but that is the reason why I mainly use my S1, because it has 10-bit 50p recording in 4K and a higher dynamic range with the full V-Log profile. I was hoping that we would get 4K 50p 10-bit in a firmware upgrade to the GH5, but I think that is probably a processor limitation. And I was also hoping to see in the new GH5 Mark II the full V-Log profile, but I think it's also a sensor limitation since it's a small Micro Four Thirds sensor. Panasonic also promises a quarter of a stop more dynamic range on the GH5 Mark II, but I think I probably won't even see that in the real world. Many people were also hoping to get the Prores Raw recording in the GH5 Mark II. I think it's not that big of a deal, because this camera can only capture around 11 stops. So if you compress that into a log curve, a 10-bit codec is sufficient enough to capture the whole dynamic range. You would need to have a camera that can capture more than 12 stops of dynamic range to use the full potential of Prores Raw. I know this is a brutal oversimplification, but I think that a 10-bit codec with a log curve is good enough for this sensor and this camera, and I think it's a good move from Panasonic that they included the Vlog-L profile pre-installed in the GH5 Mark II. Panasonic also improved its autofocus. I think that's nice. It's not that big of a deal for me, but if you need autofocus more often, I think that's great. Another big headline feature of the GH5 Mark II is the live streaming capabilities. Live streaming was never a big part of my business. I do event stuff and I do documentary stuff, and even with all that Corona thing going on, I never did that much of live streams, so live streaming was never a big deal for me. But what I saw was that it's now so much easier to live stream with the GH5 Mark II, and I think that's awesome, and I'm sure that many will benefit from this feature, and it was a great and smart move from Panasonic. So there are some features that could be a game changer if you are a GH5 shooter, but for me image capturing and the linear focus are the biggest points. But if you are an HD shooter only, I don't see a reason to switch from the GH5 original to the GH5 Mark II. So should you get the GH6 instead? Well, we already compared the OG GH5 to the GH5 Mark II, and I already stated there are some reasons that could be a big deal for some of us, but I think most GH5 shooters will still be happy with their old camera. So should you wait for the GH6? Well, there are some features that stand out. For example, the 5.7K up to 60p and 10-bit is quite something, and could this camera separate from the rest of the competition, because there is simply no camera on the market with that feature set and such a high quality, high resolution, high frame rate recording. Also 4K recording up to 120p in 10-bit was expected, of course, but I think it's great. What I'm hoping for is the full Vlog profile and a dual native sensor, but we still don't know what sensor will be in the new GH6, and I hope it's better than the sensor that we have in the GH5. Don't get me wrong, the sensor in the GH5 is great. I love the image out of that, but of course it would be nice that if a new camera is announced with a higher price tag, that we get a significant upgrade in image quality. So we still don't know that much about the GH6. But about the GH5 Mark II, I'm still not sure if I want to upgrade my cameras, since it's most of the same camera as the OG GH5. It probably would snugly fit in my already existing workflow with my multiple GH5 cameras. And I really like the update of the 4K 50p in 10-bit and the linear focusing. And since I know myself, I know that I'm a sucker for the GH camera line. I owned every GH camera that ever came out except for the GH1, and so I will probably get the GH6. Anyway, the GH cameras are just reliable workhorses for solo filmmakers for a reasonable price. They deliver outstanding images without any hassle, so I hope I won't be disappointed by the GH6. But the GH6 is still a lot of money, and the OG GH5 with its very small price tag and rich feature set is still very attractive. I know it only shoots 4K 60p in 8-bit, but if you switch from Vlog to Leica 709, you still get a very robust and high quality image. And since I like to do that, you get two OG GH5s for the price of one GH6. I think that the OG GH5 will still make many of its owners and new owners happy in the foreseeable future because of its great price tag and rich feature set. I really love the updates on the GH5 Mark II. I think they are great, but I can't say if it's justified to buy this camera over OG GH5. It's just too much of a personal thing if you want to upgrade your camera or wait for the GH6. And waiting for the GH6 in general, I don't really like waiting for a camera. I think you should just grab the camera that you have and start shooting. So I hope My thoughts were useful to you, and you have a nice day and grab your camera, go outside and shoot something extraordinary.